No lore down there. Howdy everyone. Welcome to French Bread's Dark Souls 3 lore run. I am the French Bread, or Chris if you prefer. And on today's episode we're going to be exploring a lot more of the Lothric High Wall. But before we do, as is, I guess becoming habit or custom, we'll be discussing a few operational details regarding the lore run. First of all, you'll notice that I have started on, or within, Firelink Shrine as opposed to on the high wall. You'll also notice that there is an extra bonfire spot. Unfortunately, I started this recording and ended up having some difficulties with my mic, and I had to basically scrap my previous recording. Fortunately, I did not progress too far, only recorded for about 10 minutes or so before I realized my error, and we didn't really lose any scripted events, like no bosses were felled, no NPCs talked to, not too many items picked up, things of that nature. We did, however, miss one scripted event, and you'll see it kind of twisting and writhing over there. Yeah, there's more than just inactive wyverns around here. Big shock, I know. Another thing that occurred as we played through is that I returned to Firelink Shrine and I used that Estus shard to increase the number of uses I have on my flask, and I also reallotted the Ashen Estus flask to a regular one because that's more what I need at the moment. As far as items that we picked up during my lost footage, we have the throwing knives. Nothing special here except that they are throwing knives. I used a few of the souls I picked up during my run to buy some fire bombs and some prism stones, which a friend of mine advised that I should show kind of the lesser known use of them, which I kind of displayed in the very beginning, where if you toss them off of an edge that is going to be a lethal drop, they'll emit that piercing little scream there. We also got ourselves some gold pine resin, rare pine resin which emits golden sparks. Chunks of it are even rarer. Its origins are unknown, although some have speculated that it may in fact be a type of fungal resin. That seems to be true, as I was reminded by Ian B's videos recently that these items dropped from the mushroom enemies in Dark Souls 1, so I guess that's the connection they're making. Also, I got myself a dagger from killing a hollow thief type enemy, and a longsword from killing some of the deserter slash foot soldier enemies. And we also picked up this club from the area just before where the dragon touches down. It was an item lying on the ground. Not a whole lot to say about that lore-wise, though. And I do believe that's it. Oh, we also got our hands on some Lothric Knight gauntlets, but I'm gonna hold off on talking about those too much until we reach our next bonfire. But as I kind of travel my way there again, another point I wanted to make with regards to how I'm going to be running this lore run is the fact that this is not intended to be an all on camera play. Like, there's going to be situations where I'm going to do things off camera, such as farming or inventory management or things of that nature, and they're generally not that interesting, so I don't see any reason to include them in the video. but as a result you may see me pop up in different locations or with different amounts of souls than when I had signed off. That's all that's going on. I'm not progressing through the game proper at any point without that being recorded. Alrighty. That out of the way, we can get back to sort of discussing the situation here. This body held one of the items that we picked up during the footage I lost, and that item are is the binoculars. Take a quick look at those. Made of brass, used to peer at distant scenery. Their utility is singular, but applications many. The value of these specs depend greatly on the imagination of their owner. The binoculars are kind of a favorite item of both lore seekers and desperate sorcerers alike. Lore seekers for their obvious application as kind of a lens to get a close view of things that we otherwise could not, and sorcerers in a desperate attempt to increase their effective range. For lore seekers, they're quite great. For sorcerers, well, why don't we just leave them to their particular fate? Oof, it's got me out. As you can see, this wyvern here is quite dead. Not particularly dangerous to us. And the presence of wyverns here, while not really a huge surprise to anyone who's played a Dark Souls game, especially Demon Souls, they're going to be familiar with the concept of wyverns flying around a castled area like this. They do have a reason for being here, though. They're kind of tied deeply with the Knight class of Lothric, or rather the Knight pillar of the 3 pillars of rule that assist the king with his rulership over Lothric. We will get into that shortly. First we're going to try and get past this Drake situation, or wyvern, whatever you want to call it. We're also going to try not to die to putsy little minions. So in the first play of the game, this guy has not yet shown himself. He is... Whoop. He lands as you kind of move up here to explore. That's basically the only thing of note that we missed. He's quite loud though, so I'm going to hold off on saying too much more until we get past him. As you can see, that flame effect is quite irritating. It doesn't really do too much damage unless you get caught in the main flame, but it does interrupt you quite a bit. Ordinarily, you can run up here before the dragon appears and open this gate so you can gain access to this in-between area. We'll get to that right there in just a bit. Before we deal with that, before we deal with the treasures over there, I want us to get a good look at our first Lothric Knight. This is going to be one of the first enemies in the game that really test a new player's aptitude and patience, because they are aggressive enemies and they are powerful enemies. And it is entirely possible that this one will mess me up, as we are not particularly high level yet. there's really a some kind of magical breakpoint in stamina and weapon damage where these guys go from quite imposing and dangerous to somewhat trivialized. We're not there yet though, so we're gonna take care when dealing with them. Oh, okay. Got our sleeper hollows here. Classic. Ambushes galore. We're going to head up the stairs here to the second bonfire, the one you saw on the list. Tower on the wall. Alrighty. Now we are back to the point where I was before I had to stop recording last time. And surrounded by these creepy tree people, I think it's a good time to kind of quickly discuss something that is going to be a reoccurring thing and hopefully doesn't frustrate anyone too much. But you'll have noticed that there's plenty of situations where I run into something, I comment on it a little bit, and then sort of move on without really fully explaining the situation. And that's simply something I'm doing as a result of the nature of a Let's Play or a lore run. I could discuss, everything I know about the 3 pillars of rule in Lothric and what I think is going on with those... Ooh, dangerous. What I think is going on with those tree-like entities. But if I did that, I wouldn't have a whole lot to say in the later game. So what I will do is get distracted and roughed up by this knife. Alrighty. Not exactly a proud moment, but it does teach me a lesson about trying to face more difficult enemies and also talk about complex thoughts. So we're going to pause for just a moment here while I clarify what I was trying to say. When we run into situations like this, I'm going to try and explain as much as I think is reasonable, as much as you might be able to glean encountering it the first time, but doing so with the perspective that I have now, having completed the game sometimes. And that really is something that it's part of the Dark Souls experience, is that you can read through all the item descriptions, you can listen to all the NPC expository dialogue, but a great deal of the story is also told just through the environment, the things you see and where they're placed, how they're placed. With regards to these trees, you can see that by and large they seem to be kind of facing the main castle and the connecting building next to it. And we've seen many living, or living might not be the right word, but many still animate walking around hollows, worshipping at the bases of these trees. And that's just something I think is worth remembering for later in the game, and I will bring it up again when it becomes relevant. But certainly things are not all well in Lothric, and these kind of religious displays, along with the disrepair of the city itself, in some way I think they all do correlate. Cut through this guy real quick. Pick up our souls. We have our friendly Lothric Knight returning, hopefully not to make a fool of me again. Though he's well on his way to that. That's one in for us. Yeah, without a shield that defends us 100% from physical attacks, we end up in a very difficult situation when it comes to these guys. Furthermore, my weapon does not do a great amount of... Ah, for fuck's sake. My weapon does not do a great amount of damage either. And the swings are a little haphazard. It's just not a great weapon for taking on the knights. We're going to get a better one very shortly, but for the time being, we will deal with them as best we can. Perhaps we won't deal with him at all, to save us all some time. Swear I'm good at Dark Souls. Let's quietly shuffle past and get back to this room. Here we want to deal with this chest. Before we do, let's take just a little bit of a closer look at it. This is not a normal chest. This is an old friend from the series. You can kind of see right now. Looks a bit like it's breathing, doesn't it? I don't know what lore significance these guys have. They certainly are a bit of a handful. Yes, that's right. The Mimic. Some of the original Dark Souls nightmare fuel. Want to back up just a little bit, not get ourselves stuck in a corner with this guy. Because they do good damage all around. But more than anything, we'd rather not get caught in their grab attack. We may, or may not, get a chance to witness here. Just between you and me, I'd rather not. We'll get plenty of opportunities. Our prize is the Deep Battle Axe. This isn't necessarily a unique weapon. This is just a standard battle axe. Easily wielded axe, crafted for battle, inflicting standard damage. But what is unique about it is that it's been infused with the Deep Infusion, which removes any of the attribute scaling. You can see, like, say the club has a C in what is strength. This has nothing, but it does give us some dark damage on our weapon. And for us right now, it is a vastly more powerful item. So we're going to go ahead and use that. You can see that effect of the weapon every time we hit the enemy. And hopefully we can get ourselves better shield soon. We're gonna boldly move in here, collect some of the items. Get ourselves a heal. Pick up a claymore. Fell right over. Time to go. Oh, that's interesting. Alright. Now that we've got some breathing room, let's take a quick look at what we got. An unusually large and heavy greatsword, normally wielded with 2 hands. This highly versatile weapon can be swung broadly or thrusted. Oh yes, and earlier we got this crossbow, used by the proud Lights of Lothric. It bears an elaborate gold design. The crossbow has been blessed with the power of lightning in anticipation of the use of lightning bolts. You can see it does a little bit of lightning damage all by itself. Could be helpful. Could be helpful. Not as helpful as that dragon is right now. And let's run through. Right! And me without my Estus. Let's see if we can juke this guy. Because he sapped all my confidence earlier. True heroes run. Alrighty. Since we've had a chance to witness our Lothric Knight here, let's take a look at the piece of armor we got off of the one we killed during the lost footage. Armor of a celebrated Lothric Knight. Strong steel gauntlets, if a little scratched. The Knight has served as one of the 3 pillars since ancient times, and shares a place alongside the Wyverns as a symbol of Lothric. Only those possessing a knight's resolve are fit to wear this garment. As you can see, it's a heavy item, but provides very strong physical defense and physical resistances. And hey, it doesn't look half bad on us, so we'll roll with that. Yeah, as you could see in that description, the Lothric Knights are kind of collectively grouped together under the title of the Knight in what I had referred to earlier as the 3 pillars of rule in Lothric. An essential part of an essential part of this rule seemed to be the Wyverns. We'll see later that the knights were, known to ride these Wyverns into battle. Something that I suppose made them into a very formidable fighting force. Not going to see too much of that in this game, though, because we are well past the prime, as you may have expected. But I will, in just a little bit, be discussing a bit more about the pillars. But first we're going to take a look at something that I alluded to before, but accidentally prevented us from really getting a better look at. Notice that it just gave us some fire bombs there. The game, that is. Oh my. Oh boy. I do not like this enemy. It's similar, sorry for the quiet, but need to focus just a little bit. These are very similar to kind of the life form we encountered when fighting Udic Skundir. But unlike Udic Skundir, these guys are deeply threatening. And I'm sure he'll have no problem hitting me through the floor if he wishes. Good grief. Look at all that black tar. I guess we're suitably rewarded with an Ember and a Titanite Shard, but if you don't have fire bombs, or I suppose if you're not a pyromancer who never uses their pyromancy, that enemy is quite dangerous. Just for like the sheer amount of damage it does, the unpredictability of its movements, and just how easily it can break your guard with the kind of the strength of its attacks. And as I stated before, these enemies are called the Pus of Men, or the Pus of Man. But as for details on them, well, that's not too clear. That's not too clear to me even now. I have a few ideas, but as you might have guessed, we are not quite ready to get into that. Suffice it to say that Lothric is kind of fallen on hard times, and the presence of these, these monsters is no coincidence in relating to that fact. Nice little ambush here. Oh, nice. Every little Titanite shard helps, right? Down here, we got a whole big mess going on. And a very intimidating enemy putzing around. Huh. I recognize that sword. Interesting. I'm not sure, but I believe this is a statue of Prince Lothric. But the sword he seems to be holding onto is not a sword that is affiliated with Lothric in the game. I won't get into it later, but that looks a lot like a weapon called the Profane Greatsword. That's very interesting to me. As we can see down here, there is just an entire unit of what appear to be Lothric Knights that have been handily taken care of by this big fella with the adorable little wings. We're gonna get to that, but not just yet. The Black Fire Bomb. Nothing really to say about these except that they are more powerful variations of the regular fire bomb. Alright, let's continue down deeper into the castle here. Hello. Hello. Yeah, so... Ooh. Now these are the... You thought the other knights were bad. They don't have a whole lot on the spear knights, let me tell you. But as I was saying, the Knights of Lothric seem to have been, at one point very important to the organization of Lothric, but as we'll kind of see from a later knight who has his, oh that's lucky, who has his helmet exposed, I don't think they're all there anymore. I think these knights have properly hollowed and they're just kind of going through the motions, as it were. Oof. Obvious path here. Obvious ambush there. Alrighty. Got herself another weapon. The broadsword, straight sword with a broad blade designed for slashing. Large sweeping attack makes this effective against crowds, but is prone to deflection from walls and narrow spaces. And that's definitely something you kind of saw just now with my axe, trying to break through that debris, bouncing off the wall there. The broadsword is kind of like it's like the longsword, but a little bit less versatile, but it has better scaling with strength and a little bit better base damage. I kind of like it. Some people don't. It's really up to personal preference. It lacks that very useful stab attack in its moveset that the longsword and others have. We also got the Lothric Knight Long Spear, wielded by the proud Lothric Knights. Lothric Spear Knights are known for their steadfastness, and this spear boosts the poise of its wielder. And that's kind of just like an innate poise boost that you get. You can see in the corner there, it goes from 5 to 15. We also got the Great Shield. Great Shield of the renowned Lothric Knights, decorated with a holy symbol. The knights who form the High Priestess's Guard carried great shields such as these, which were granted high magic absorption through her blessing. So that kind of ties in nicely with a little bit of discussion on one of the other pillars of rule in Lothric. One are the knights, renowned for their, their swordsmanship, their steadfastness, and their wyverns. Another pillar was called the priestess, which seems to have been their religious arm, and that was headed up most specifically by the High Priestess, a character we will have the opportunity to encounter a bit later on. Let's see if I can... Nope. I hit him, but no benefit from that. And we'll see in later descriptions, but the knights and the priestess definitely had a strong connection. A stronger connection, I think, than they did necessarily with one of the other pillars of rule. I mean, the knights are present throughout the entirety of Lothric. They're clearly dedicated to, all three pillars and the king themselves, but it seems like there's a very special connection between the knights and the priestess, given that many of their arms and armor are kind of carry her blessing. And we'll get into that just a little bit more in a bit. But first we're gonna do our darndest not to get murdered here. I don't think I favor our odds at the moment. Let's take a step back and reevaluate. It's funny how much a little shield will help you. A 100% shield, that is. Can I? Yeah, almost. Alrighty. We'll be bold. Fortune favors them, right? Before we deal with that, let's see if we can't improve our odds a little bit. Take out this cheeky little bastard. Open this chest. And acquire that shield I keep rattling on about. And before we read up on these items, I'm just gonna clear the area because I have not established a good record of fighting and talking. A little bit of profit here. Nope. Just can't quite seem to get those Get those barrels to explode when I need them to. The Mutts of Lothric. Alrighty. And now we got possibly... Alright, clear down there. And I know we've got one other gentleman here. Yeah, you bet. Okay. That was a little bit hectic. A little bit down to the wire, but we managed to pull it off. Collect an Estus shards from this... I don't know. Would you call this a small altar in the room? It's clearly different from every other piece of furniture. It is remarked that the shards of Estus were kind of a symbol of hope. Complete speculation, but maybe that served as a small symbol of hope for the undead who wandered here. And a cell key. Alright. And I think just through here, another Titanite shard. We love Titanite shards. Okay. Let's take a moment and examine all the things we've managed to pick up here. Green Blossom. A green weed shaped like a flower. Boosts our stamina recovery speed. The Undead Legion of Farron are remembered for using this annual plant, normally found near clear water, to swing their mighty swords with abandon. The Green Blossom is a long-time item in Dark Souls. In this case, what the hell? Y'all heard that, right? In this case, it's being kind of connected with the Undead Legion, the Abyss Watchers and their acolytes, I suppose. The Lords of Cinder we saw in the opening. They are fond of using great swords, so I suppose use of this item helps facilitate a very wild and reckless style. These are a hugely important item, at least with terms of understanding the connections between the lore of Dark Souls 3 and previous games. In the past, this item, which in gameplay terms is a thrown item that if it hits an NPC or another player, it will temporarily prevent them from using their Estus to recover. They used to be called Lloyd's Talismans, but now, if we read the description, used long ago by Lloyd's cleric knights on their undead hunts. Although Allfather Lloyd is long forgotten by the Way of White, his hunts have lived on, and this charm allows one to challenge undead without fear of tenacious healing. So, the Way of White, a major religious, I guess, institution and covenant from Dark Souls 1, has continued into the current era that we are playing in. Before, it was heavily associated with Allfather Lloyd, who I believe was implied to be the uncle of Gwyn. But it appears that he's been forgotten, and we'll see why that is a little bit later, but suffice it to say, the Way of White is a very changed institution. It is not centered in the same locales, and it is not, its clerics are not drawn from the same sort of people that they used to be. And the fact that this is now called an Undead Hunter charm kind of attests to that. Let's see, we got ourselves a raw gem earlier. A gem of infused titanite. Forged in the weapons, I suppose, of the Lothric foot soldiers. what the raw infusion does is it completely removes any scaling, but it increases the base damage of any weapon you get. Previously in Souls games, this was a terrible infusion. It was never worth it. In Dark Souls 3, it's actually a very useful infusion in the early game, or if you are playing like a low level, no leveling type build. And it's kind of interesting that these were used to, as I suppose, a quick and dirty way of improving the weapons of Lothric foot soldiers, who would not be very skilled, would not be, in gameplay terms, a high-level character. So it makes quite a bit of sense, actually, that a kingdom as prosperous as Lothric was would use these gems to improve even their most basic troops. Cell key. Key to a cell holding thieves and the like. There is no shortage of brash thieves in Lothric, and these particular thieves likely scaled the wall from the undead settlement. But they are only willing to practice their thievery on the high wall, for their fear of Lothric Castle, rumored to devour men, keeps them clear of its grounds. So, this is kind of interesting. This item definitely gives us the impression that things have been wrong in Lothric for a long time, if they weren't always wrong. But people may have feared the nobility in, say, the real world, but I'm pretty sure they weren't afraid of the nobility and their castles devouring men. So it seems like things have been going wrong for quite a while. In this undead settlement is a location that we'll be diving into later on, but for now it's just something for us to keep in mind. Let's see, we get any other weapons? No. Silver Eagle Kite Shield. Orthodox metal shield engraved with a crest depicting a silver eagle. Medium shields are the most average of shields, providing practical balance of damage, absorption, stability, and weight. So not a lot of lore or anything on this, but this is an excellent shield. It has 100% physical block absorption, so any physical attacks that we block with the shield don't harm us as they did with this shield, where we basically were taking half the damage of anything that hit us. You'll also notice that in the bottom left corner you see that little icon looks like a sword. This denotes that when we press the L2 button, instead of doing a parry, we will utilize our weapon skill even though we aren't wielding that weapon two-handed. So that's awesome. Sometimes you want to be able to parry. Sometimes you'd rather be able to have very quick access to your weapon skill without having to fumble between hands. It depends a lot on what weapon you're using and what shield you're using. For our particular character, I think a shield that allows us to use our weapon skill is going to be a lot more helpful, at least for the time being. And let's see, did we get anything else? As a lot of items all at once. Apologize if that was a little tedious to go through. Oh, I forgot about these trousers we got. Nothing much to say about them though. Rusted hunk of metal befits one reduced to thievery. It implies that these guys were foot soldiers no more, but mere thieves. But I don't know. It's a little difficult to judge. But I think we're starting to run over time. And as I say that, I remember that we forgot to look at the Astora Straight Sword. Let's do that when we come back. Next time, we're going to take a look at that Astora Straight Sword, and then we're going to, I believe, finish exploring the high wall, and I think we will indeed confront our first boss. But for now, I'm going to bid you guys adieu. See you later, everyone.